major muscle groups. It lets you accomplish fitness goals such as weight loss, cardiovascular health, increased energy, and reduced stress. With Nordic Trek, you'll simply look and feel better than you ever have before. I'll bet you never imagined fitness at home could be this easy and convenient, or that you could actually enjoy becoming more slender, energetic, confident, and fit. Now is the time to get rid of that unfit body.
Create a new you.
Try Nordic Track for 30 days at home with no risk or obligation. Call now for a free video and brochure.
You'll see and feel the difference.
There are some 30,000 nuclear arms in the Soviet nuclear arsenal. Of those, 1/3 are capable of striking distances as far away as the United States. The other 2/3 are shorter-range tactical nuclear weapons. The whereabouts of the long-range weapons has been known for some time. They've been located in 4 republics: Russia, the Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. But until now, there was uncertainty about the location of the other, smaller nuclear weapons. CNN's Wolf Blitzer has now learned that those weapons, too, have been moved to the 4 so-called nuclear republics, a source of reassurance for the United States and Europe during this period of transition.
As fighting continues in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, CNN has learned that all tactical nuclear weapons are now believed to have been removed from that troubled area. Western sources say that's also the case in other unstable republics, such as Armenia and Azerbaijan. Indeed, the sources say that in recent months, the former Soviet authorities methodically transferred smaller nuclear arms to what are called the 4 nuclear republics: Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, where the huge long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles have long been known to be concentrated. Tactical nuclear weapons pose unique problems.
Not all of them are of the most contemporary design, and therefore not of them have the most secure locks.
U.S. Secretary of State James Baker received assurances last week that only Russia would remain a nuclear power under the new Commonwealth that was formally established in Alma-Ata, Kazakhstan. A high-level team of U.S. nuclear experts is due to arrive in Moscow in January to begin talks with the new central military authorities on the entire issue of nuclear security.
We are very eager to meet with American experts, and we would welcome American assistance, and our experts will be happy to collaborate with American specialists in dismantlement of nuclear warheads.
At issue will be the nuclear republic's readiness to honor existing arms control agreements, including the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty known as START and the Conventional Weapons Reduction Treaty, the CFE Accord. Both were signed but never formally ratified by the old Soviet government. In addition, the U.S. is pressing Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as non-nuclear powers. Finally, the U.S. team will offer advice on how to impose strict controls to ensure that nuclear weapons and technology are not exported to third world countries. U.S. officials are hoping that the delegation will return to Washington with specific proposals to secure the nuclear arsenal. Congress recently appropriated $400 million to fund this process, and the Bush administration is anxious to start spending it. So are the leaders of the new Commonwealth. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, Moscow.
Recognition of the Commonwealth of Independent States is sure to create the need for some skillful diplomatic maneuvering for the Bush administration in the year ahead. As CNN's Charles Bierbauer reports, there is no shortage of issues to be resolved.
For the Russians, the transition out of the Soviet Union will be relatively easy, at least diplomatically. Boris Yeltsin has already taken over the Kremlin. He's moved his people into the Soviet embassy here in Washington. In diplomatic terms, Russia is the continuation state for the Soviet Union. So when President Bush Thursday formally recognizes the independence of 12 former Soviet republics, the Russians simply assume the real estate, the United Nations seat, and the treaties and obligations that were once the Soviet Union. U.S. Ambassador Robert Strauss remains on the job in Moscow, though his domain will be considerably diminished. He'll only be ambassador to Russia, but that's not small potatoes. The U.S. will be sending new ambassadors to Kiev, Minsk, Yerevan, Alma-Ata, and Bishkek. the capitals of Ukraine, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Those 5 will gain diplomatic recognition from the U.S. this week. That means offices to rent and more jobs in the diplomatic corps in all capitals. But the process could take months. U.S. ambassadors have not yet been named for the 3 Baltic states which gained diplomatic recognition in September. The remaining 5 members of the new Commonwealth of Independent Republics and the battle-ridden non-member Georgia will have to wait for diplomatic recognition from the U.S. They'll have to prove their commitment to democratic and economic reform, protection of human rights, and adherence to arms control treaties. U.S. officials say there are plenty of unanswered questions. Do the treaties need negotiation or ratification by each republic? Does recognition bring with it the desirable most favored nation trade status? This will keep the diplomats running for a while. The proliferation of nations will keep others busy too. Inevitably, the new republic leaders will make their pilgrimages to the diplomatic mecca of the Oval Office. The Soviet anthem and flag will hardly suffice. That means a bonanza for flag manufacturers and a dozen new tunes for bandsmen to learn. Charles Biermeier, CNN, the White House.
When we come back, we'll talk with the former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, Arthur Hartman. Stay with us.
Recently, Stouffer Hotels hosted the chairman of Dow Jones, held a meeting for the president of AT&T, planned a banquet for the CEO of Avis, and welcomed lots of other important presidents, too. In fact, maybe the reason we're one of America's top-rated luxury hotels is that our presidential suites are so often filled with presidents. Stouffer Hotels and Resorts. You can depend on our good name.
It started early this morning, that feeling that something was a little off. But by noon, her fever had started to climb. Her whole body ached. And now at 5:30, she's coughing, congested. Her head is pounding. Kate Porter has the flu. And now all she can think about is relief. Theraflu relief. Theraflu is serious flu medicine doctors recommend. Soothing, hot liquid relief to ease flu symptoms fast. Theraflu, your flu misery stops here.
Jockey makes me feel so comfortable.
So comfortable. Jockey. So comfortable. So comfortable. Jockey. So
live so comfortable. On sale now.
Tonight on Sports Tonight, well, they say not a creature is stirring, not even a mouse, and that's the word in the world of sports this Christmas Eve. But we'll take a look at Phoenix Suns coach Cotton Fitzsimmons' other job off the court. See you at 11 o'clock Eastern tonight.
Joining us to discuss the Soviet transformation, a former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, Arthur Hartman. Mr. Ambassador, welcome. Barring something totally unforeseen, Mikhail Gorbachev tomorrow will resign. How do you think he'll be judged by history?
I think he's made a major contribution. We got through the withdrawals in various parts of the world without wars, without fights, without interventions in Eastern Europe. He started a political revolution. What he was unable to do was to overcome his basic training and to make decisions in economics. He could not get away from the central control and the central planning.
Now we have a dominant figure by the name of Boris Yeltsin. Do you suppose he will have some kind of political honeymoon, or will he quickly inherit the kind of popular discontent that helped to win Mr. Gorbachev?
Well, he's got, first of all, to do something about the economy. And whenever you do anything about this kind of economy, you're going to cause troubles. You're going to raise prices. You're going to make a lot of people unhappy. A lot of people are going to be out of work. After all, they've abolished some of the major ministries. They're going to get out of a lot of production that they've been in the military field, for example. So it's going to make many people very unhappy, and he If he's going to have a honeymoon, it's going to be a very short one.
And how about the people around Boris Yeltsin, those who are advising him? Is it a top caliber team?
Well, they're getting younger and younger. They're all in their 20s and 30s now. A little while ago, they were in their 40s and 50s. These are fellows who believe that the shock treatment is all that's going to work, that you've got to break the old system, you've got to start something new, and you've got to put it in place quickly. We have some Americans there advising them, like Jeffrey Sachs. There's a lot of opposition to this. Yeltsin's own vice president is very much against it. But I think they do have to use some kind of shock treatment because it's the only way to get people thinking in a different way.
Well, what do you suppose Yeltsin is able to do in the short term, given the depth of problems he faces?
Well, the major thing he's got to do is to get the old guys out of control of these industries. He's got to shape the industries down. He's got to free prices. They hope that with the freeing of prices, they'll be able to bring some of the agricultural products that are in that country right today into the market. But the major thing is he's just got to free up people who really want to be entrepreneurial. And it's a new generation.
You have just returned from the Soviet Union. Any way to characterize the attitudes you found there? Is there a seed of hope at this point?
The younger intellectuals I find very hopeful. The older people are uniformly pessimistic. They think this whole thing's going to end up in the streets. I think the average Russian, if you were to scratch him, would be pessimistic, as Russians always are, and feeling that things are not going to improve very quickly, if at all, and wondering where the next meal is coming from.
And how do you see the U.S. role at this juncture?
Well, I think the U.S. role, first of all, we should not kid ourselves. We're not in control of this situation. We can't make it go in any particular direction. We should be making sure that something like starvation isn't going to intervene in this process that's going to be a long-term evolution of political and economic affairs. The other thing I think we've got to do is to get more technical assistance in there. I'd like, for example, to see our military, in addition to destroying weapons, actually go in there and help them build roads and maybe train their military to do some useful things in the civilian economy.
And how does Robert Strauss handle his role as ambassador?
Well, he's now ambassador to Russia, and I think he'll handle it very well. He's got a vigorous guy to deal with, and I think he's going to try to get Americans interested in the developments in Russia and to keep the reform movement going.
And in 15 seconds, let me ask you a question I asked Rick Smith last night. If we were to sit here a year from now and discuss the situation in the former Soviet Union, do you suppose we'll be able to look back on a year of hopeful signs?
I think it's going to be different in the different republics. Some republics are going to go in a more authoritarian direction, the way Georgia has, not with the fighting, but just authoritarian. They're in the hands of the old guard, some of them. Even in Russia, I think if the situation worsens economically, you're going to hear less talk of democracy and more talk of let's take some strong measures.
Mr. Ambassador, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Jim.
Did Mikhail Gorbachev's success lead to his political demise? Coming up, a profile of the life and times of the last leader of the Soviet Union.
Grandpa's Popular Science.
Love those.
Hey, Dad, look at this.
There's still film in here.
What are you going to do with it?
The more important the photo, the more reason to trust it to record.
It's Grandpa and some kid with a mop.
It wasn't a mop. It was a fiery horse with the speed of light.
Hi-ho, Silver, away!
It looks like a mop to me.
When Marjorie Godsick saw my picture in her mail, she entered the American Family Sweepstakes, and...
I won $10 million.
Because...
I returned the winning number in time.
Congratulations. My picture and the $10 million winning number may be in your mail right now. Return it in time, and you'll be set for life. Don't risk losing a $10 million fortune that can put you on Easy Street real fast. Look for my picture in your mail and enter at once.
Everyone has a dream.
I don't always get an investing idea between 9 and 5. So when it clicks, I do my homework. And I call Charles Schwab. I can call Schwab at any hour for quotes, news, earnings. And when I buy or sell, I get commission savings too.
For free information about Schwab services, call toll-free 800 257-1257.
Next in consumer news, California.
When you need the latest business and financial news, turn to CNN Headline News at 15 and 45 minutes after every hour. Dollars and cents on CNN Headline News.
Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev is about to walk from the Kremlin into the history books as the last leader of the Soviet Union. His leadership made possible an end to communist domination from Eastern Europe to the border of China. CNN's Mark Leff has this look at Mikhail Gorbachev.
Gorbachev's roots were in the land of the Northern Caucasus. He grew up in a society under Stalin where political control was everything. In a farming family, among people who tried but often failed to control nature.
People here have an urge not to rest. The land around Stavropol doesn't allow you to. And that brings out traits like restlessness, a wish to experiment, to take risks. That's what makes a man like him.
He honed his political skills and practiced his free market theories as a Communist Party official back home in Stavropol, where some people who worked with him remember him fondly.
At that time, before he was on the Central Committee, I never thought he would be the man to change the whole system.
To do that, he had to make major changes in that system, symbolized for years by overinvestment in military hardware at the expense of an economy that fed international ambition but not its own people, and symbolized by millions of men in military uniform, paid, like most workers in the Soviet Union, at the expense of the state, people who could be of more use building things at home than guarding things abroad. And Gorbachev reached out to shake hands with historic hardline adversaries on two fronts, bargaining with, some say outmaneuvering, a U.S. president born only 4 years after Brezhnev, using the symbolism of world peace to scale back the so-called arms race, and in the process to save Russian rubles he felt could be put to better use. He taught the world two Russian words, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, and taught his own people, conditioned by decades of obedience, that it was okay to talk back, up to a point. He let the outspoken scientist Andrei Sakharov out of internal exile in Gorky, only to find the physicist-turned-politician challenging him to his face after winning a seat in the Soviet parliament. Another leader might have had Sakharov shot for his insolence. Instead, after the aging scientist died of a heart attack while working on a parliamentary speech, Gorbachev went to his funeral. During a visit to the walled fortress of East Berlin to celebrate 40 years of solidarity in socialism, Gorbachev had the power to tell East Germany's leadership the time had come to tear down the wall between dogma and reality. But he was powerless to prevent or even to predict the tide of popular sentiment that not only tore down the wall that had kept people within the system, but went on to tear apart the post-war political map of Europe. People in nations near the Soviet border that had been nominally tied to the Soviet Union by choice went on to choose a different future. Germans with Germans, like the rest, looking west. The doctor who promised a new cure for his country's economic ills found the sickness of separatism spreading within its borders as well. The man who wanted to dismantle the Stalinist political and economic system discovered that the same notion, translated into Lithuanian, Armenian, and other languages heard in the Republic's ringing Russia, meant dismantling their ties to Moscow as well. Gorbachev ripped apart the comfortable communist notion that the party tells the government what to do, and put the government ahead of the party, with himself on top, both as party leader and in a new role as president. But that supremacy didn't last long. The right wing made its move just 3 weeks after the Soviet president signed a treaty to dismantle much of the country's nuclear arsenal. The day before, he was to return from vacation to sign an agreement with several republics that party conservatives felt would dismantle the Soviet Union. 8 men whom Gorbachev had appointed, some because of party pressure, isolated him at his lakeside home and proclaimed a state of emergency. For 3 days, Boris Yeltsin, by default or by design, became the sole remaining symbol of reform. Gorbachev returned to Moscow to an old political tradition that put his right-wing opponents in prison and to a new political reality that put Boris Yeltsin on an equal footing. His personal downfall from the pinnacle of power came at the hands of a man he'd helped install as part of the process of change, a man who'd nominally saved Mikhail Gorbachev from the hardliners, but a phenomenon who'd left Gorbachev and communism behind. Gorbachev had won the Nobel Peace Prize by starting a political chain reaction. But like the chain reaction at Chernobyl, it eventually flared out of control. Toward the end, said critics, he was behind the times he created. A man who knew how to seize the moment, but not always how to see or control the future. Mark Leff, CNN, reporting.
In Moscow, I'm Jim Clancy.
Merry Christmas, Jim. In Washington, I'm Gene Randall. Tomorrow night, the State of the Union will be extended to a full hour beginning at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Merry Christmas.
Coming up, Larry King Live, followed by World News after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
Remember the story of the 3 little pigs? It took 3 tries before they learned to make a house that was safe from the wolf. Well, people have tried a lot more than 3 ways to build houses. First off, most people find bricks are too expensive. So what else have we tried? Well, there's wood, but you know what you have to do to wood every 3 or 4 years.